This video is presently entitled Adding More Drama to a Story, unless or until I can come up with a better title. Because that's what I ultimately had to do with a new novel, which is yet unnamed. But what prompted this video is something that happened to me that caused me to put my project down for a long time. I had a death in my family. My cousin and best friend, Michael, got diagnosed and passed away from cancer in all of 2 weeks. It was shocking and devastating, and my whole life went upside down. Now, anyone who has lost a loved one, you know what I mean. At least 3 months passed before I could even think of writing again. When I opened the project in Scrivener, I couldn't even remember what the story was about. So I read through the draft, and I also realized that on top of needing to finish the outline of the novel, I needed to also beef up the drama in the first half of the story. Now, I assumed this process of picking up and writing the story outline at the same time as adding these new dramatic elements, that this was going to be a long, tedious process that was going to take me at least twice as long as it usually takes to write a first draft. But it had to be done, and so I just started in. But it turned out to be way easier than I thought, and that's why I decided to make this video for any newbie authors out there who find themselves in the same position. I do write pretty extensive scene outlines, especially in parts 1 and 2 of the plot structure. As I scroll here, you can see that I write the crime in red and the subplot and any romance in blue. These are like landmarks in the overall outline, and they did help me to pick up the story after so much time had lapsed. So that's why I'm mentioning them here. It was easy to scroll through the different parts of the story. Now, as far as scene outlines in parts 3 and 4 of the story structure, I only write them in using broad strokes, just enough to make sure that the crime, the clues, and the revelation of the culprit, they all still fit together. I do this because writing a novel is a very creative process, and I always get better ideas when I'm writing in the outline layer or again when I am writing in the first draft layer. By not writing the scene outlines as extensively, it's easier to go with the new ideas that pop up. It's a lot easier to change your mind about something when it doesn't entail throwing out 3 hours of work you already did. That's why I only use the broad strokes. Okay, so I'm in Scrivener now. I do apologize. I have the gardeners outside, so hopefully they're not too loud for the video. But if they are, I just apologize. Okay, so the top document here is the crime spine and outline. This is probably the first document that I actually write, and it contains the crime and kind of the suspects and how the clues will drop. And this just gives me a broad outline of what's going to take place inside the novel. Okay. And then once I get a workable story, then I come into this document, which I believe I've already given you a peek at. This is where I break up the action and the scenes into the 4-part story structure. And again, I put the crime in red and the subplots in blue. And this way I work off of this document in order to start my scene outlines. Okay. So in this particular case, when I had to recreate the book after the death in my family, the death of my cousin, I created this document here, additions to the storyline. Now, every single story is a bit different. In this particular book, there's a lot of interviews because they're all pointing at one another. Okay. So I decided to, instead of trying to just read through it and make changes here or there or on this page, that page, I decided to go through this and create another sort of outline to add the more dramatic parts into the interviews themselves. And then this way, as I made my way through the first half of the book, I was able to then add in the information already knowing, where I was headed and what I was doing. And so this was the process that made it very easy to do all that I needed to do when I finally picked up this project again. And that's why I made this video. It's mainly for the newbies, because these are the types of videos I wish I saw when I was first starting out. At the end, I also added a bit of information that I wanted to remember and where I wanted to put it, just to make sure I didn't forget anything in the process. Now, I'm not suggesting that I am the knower of all things regarding novel writing. But when I was new at writing novels, I searched all the time for authors' workflow, writing a novel behind the scenes, and a million other search terms, trying to get a glimpse of how each author worked or how other authors worked. But I never found anything. I'm convinced that if I could have seen how some other authors worked and their workflow, that I would have advanced a lot faster. That's water under the bridge now for me, but maybe other authors will now begin to show their workflow as well. I have always thought seeing another artist's workflow would be like being an unpaid intern with them. A new author can learn a lot from looking over your shoulder at your workflow. It may not lead to copying your work necessarily, but just introducing another concept or idea in managing the writing process. And that's also why I have created the Peek Behind the Novel series on my website. Now, right now, I'm quickly scrolling through the different blog entries to give you an overview of how I have it set up and some of the topics that I cover. This is geared for beginners, for those that are at a point where they want to see the workflow of other authors. I have found that writing a novel in layers sets things up so that I can disappear over a weekend or get busy with a long holiday or even go on a vacation for 2 weeks. And when I come back and pick up the project, I know exactly where I am. I don't have to reread the entire novel from the beginning to catch up where I can dive back in. Now, of course, being away for 3 months after a shocking death in the family was different. I did forget the whole story and I had to start from the beginning. But anyway, normally with a 2 week vacation, I can just get right back into it and there's no problem. Anyway, I hope this peek into my workflow will help all the newbies who may be watching, help you to either write your novel or write them faster or find a better way, whatever. I hope you enjoyed this video. Now, I'm trying to build my YouTube channel and hope if you enjoyed this or you learned anything, you will take the time to like, comment, and subscribe because it's very helpful to me. Thanks for watching. I will leave you with a panel of all of my books that are available for purchase on Amazon.com, and I will see you in the next video.